Hello everyone, welcome to the Yissel Missile Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and today we are on part 15 of our deep dive series into Coral Castle, built by Ed Leedskalnin. Today we're reading further into The Energy Grid by Bruce L. Cathie. And we are picking up from Chapter 5, The Mysterious Aerials. I hope you're all doing well tonight. So, I'll get this slideshow going. Hope you're all doing well. What do y'all think of this so far? We're starting to get pretty deep into this book here. Hey, Woo. Good to see you. There we go. I'm switching it back to the Coral Castle photos for today. So let's read about some UFOs. I know it may not seem like it's related to Coral Castle here, but this is to do with the energy grid and the ley lines, which I believe Ed Leedskalnin knew quite a bit about, that he didn't let on. So, let's begin. Chapter 5, The Mysterious Aerials. On a blazing morning of February 1968, some information came my way which was to start off a whole new chain of investigation, and which was to bring me to a number of discoveries so startling that even now their full implications are hard to comprehend. As a theory, anti-gravity looks all very well. True, it would make obsolete overnight such antiquated forms of transportation as trains, cars, aircraft, and rocket-propelled spaceships. True, it would revolutionize our thinking about fuel oil resources and basic engineering. But suppose the theory were not only correct, but in actual application today. Suppose there were a great many people fully aware of the existence of the UFO grid and its mighty potential as a power source that could be tapped by Earth technology. Suppose, in fact, that equipment had been set up in many parts of the world, even right here in quiet New Zealand, where nothing very earth-shattering ever seems to happen. Then would not this mean that, in fact, anti-gravity was virtually within the grasp of us all? A group of fellow pilots and myself had finished preparing our flight plans for the first flight of the day, and we were chatting generally when a co-pilot came up to me and said he had noticed an odd-looking aerial mast on his way to the airfield. It was, he said, on private property, but its shape was so unusual, and it was so patently expensive-looking that it had caught his attention. Like many other aircrew members, this pilot had shown considerable interest in my UFO research and had got into the habit of noting any unusual activities up and down the country which could possibly have a bearing on my investigations. By training and experience, pilots are good observers and generally capable of making concise, factual, and impartial reports. Hey, Lil Cam, 5'1", I see you on there. Good to have you here. In fact, I am greatly indebted to pilots and aircrew as a group for a great deal of help and many fascinating leads. Many there present that February morning were aware of some suspicions I had concerning some unusual radio transmitting stations that were springing up around New Zealand. But until this time, I had no proof that these stations were anything other than what they purported to be. What had principally stimulated my suspicions was a little more than an occasional rumor, and the evasiveness of officials when pointed questions were asked. The co-pilot wondered if the mast he had seen, with its strangely shaped array of aerials perched on top, could have any connection with the evidence I was looking for. He made a rough sketch of the mast for me, and I immediately sensed a familiarity about the pattern in which the hardware was arranged. Certainly, it was only a rough sketch. The co-pilot, whatever his virtues, is no artist. But the sketch he drew on the side view of the mast had a marked similarity to the polar patterns of the UFO grid system. This intrigued me greatly, and I had a hunch that a closer look at this aerial might provide a key to unlock yet another section of the Pandora's box with which I had become involved. That evening, I contacted my journalist friend Peter Tem, and we arranged to meet the next day. Armed with a camera equipped with a telephoto lens, we planned to drive to the area in question and quietly obtain a few close-ups of the aerial for closer scrutiny at our leisure. A few days later, we pored over a series of 10 good enlarged photographs, which showed the aerial and the house to which it was linked. The aerial was in the shape of a cube, with each side about 9 feet long. Supports for the wires forming the box-like shape radiated from a central point. These were 8 in number, with each individual support terminating at a corner of the box. The aerial was supported from the central point of the box shape on top of a lattice steel mast we estimated to be about 30 feet high. A check revealed that according to post office regulations, this expensive and elaborate device was nothing more sinister than a ham radio aerial erected by the owner for communication with hundreds of other technically knowledgeable hams scattered around the world. Maybe so. We even found that there was a technical name for the general form of aerial in the photographs. Neither of us being in any way informed about ham radio, this came as news. But somehow the gear had a slick, sophisticated look about it that gave it a ring of something more than a kind of ham device one can almost see anywhere. Hams are enthusiastic and inventive folk, skillful at rigging and jury-rigging their own designed aerials. But a great deal of money is not generally laid out on the mast. In this country, at least, a length of wire stretched from a wooden mast is more than the norm. Or it's actually more the norm, not more than. Sometimes the amateur operator will have a few dipoles across the top of his mast for directional purposes. But this one had a decidedly professional look about it. I decided to check a bit further, and to start off with, I set about plotting the position of the aerial on my Auckland grid map to see if any correlations would show up. At first, nothing unusual presented itself. There seemed to be no connection with the aerial site and the grid system, but something kept nagging at me. I had a very strong feeling that there was a connection, and that a thorough search of the facts and figures would bring it out. At this point, I decided to plot coordinates from the various positions of known UFO activity already plotted on the Auckland map. The results were immediately interesting. A line plotted through position where a large, disc-shaped UFO had been observed hovering over Inverary Road, Epsom, and the point where an unexplained explosion occurred in Rutland Street, Auckland, some 11 years previously, passed directly through the location of the North Shore aerial. This was hardly anything conclusive, but it suggested a possible lead. I told Peter of my find, and we agreed that the next step was to search the Auckland area for similar aerials, plot their positions on the map, and then look again for correlations of data. In the interim, I began to spread the word among many of my associates and fellow pilots that we were hunting for aerials, and asked them to keep an eye out. Over the next 4 months, I spent my days off work cruising around the Auckland area looking for anything unusual in the way of masts and aerials. Results exceeded all expectations. A surprisingly large number of strange aerials turned up. Plotted on the Auckland map, they showed quite clearly that they were more than ham listening posts. Although in every instance, they were in fact listed as belonging to ham stations in the official ham radio yearbook. It was clear that the specialized aerials were set up in straight lines in relationship to one another, and in addition were blended into the UFO grid pattern established over the Auckland area. At this point, I was faced with the obvious conclusion that a group of electronics experts knew far more than I did about the grid system, and moreover, that the knowledge must have been in their possession for quite some years. Some of the aerials we found had been located on the present sites for periods ranging up to several years. When the implications of this dawned on me, the shock was severe. The grid was no longer just a theoretical possibility. It was a definite fact, and a fact that had been known to an indefinite but clearly large number of people for some considerable time. It looked to me as though electronic equipment was being built into the network, as though they were carrying out or controlling large-scale experiments. But to what purpose? And who were they? Both of these questions cannot yet be answered. However, we shall present some of our speculations, and we hope that readers will come to light with further information that will help solve the mystery. There was another method by which we could prove conclusively that the so-called ham radio stations were established on certain geometric positions for purposes other than for private experiment or simple communication. By a study of the geometric pattern that had emerged from a careful plotting of all the known aerial sites, it should be possible to predict where other odd aerials would show up. If the pattern was right, if our thinking was right, we should be able to extend the pattern, rather like the series type of problem sometimes presented in intelligence tests, and declare that therefore another aerial should be located here, there, or over there on the map. If, on the other hand, the positions were entirely coincidentally linked with the grid, if in fact there was no connection at all, and if indeed the aerials were genuinely ham stations and scattered in more or less random order over the countryside, such predictions would simply not be valid. One Friday night, I spent a couple hours studying the network of aerials and calculated various coordinates from their positions. When I had pinpointed what seemed to me to be a most likely position for an aerial as yet undiscovered by us, I called Peter and we arranged for a meeting the following afternoon. On an ordinary street map, we penciled in the position where I expected an odd aerial should be located. Then, with a camera handy, we went off on our hunt. This was to be the first big test. I was reasonably confident that we would find an aerial where I had plotted it on the map, but at the same time I was horribly aware that I could also be falling flat on my face. I had still been compelled to assume certain geometric relationships in connection with the system. Whoever had planned the evident aerial network already knew for certain all the relationships involved. while I had to fumble through a maze of calculations to theorize about them. I was not certain also how Peter was reacting to my theories. We hadn't long been working together at that stage, and up to now he had simply had to take my word for many aspects of my research. But if the present excursion proved to be successful, the greatest gain for both of us could be a firming up of confidence. We approached the street I had circled on the street map and turned the corner, and there it was. I was both relieved and excited. Peter seemed quietly surprised. The aerial before us, and which we photographed, was a two-way complex of directional components. Coordinates from several other aerial positions passed through this point from different directions. My plot had been accurate to within about 100 feet or so, which, considering the quality of the survey maps I use, was fairly close to precision. We found a place from which we could take photographs to add to our growing pile of pictorial evidence for the existence of an aerial network, and went home. There was still a slim possibility that the finding of an aerial almost exactly where I had predicted it to be could have been by chance alone. I knew that it was by no chance. But at the same time, we recognized the fact that skeptics would make this claim. However, a short time later, and on two different occasions, I was able to go through the identical performance for yet another two aerials. First figuring on the map where they ought to be, in accordance with the emerging pattern, and my theories on the factors involved in locating the strange masts. And then with a street map and a car, actually locating them in precisely those positions. In all honesty, I must also admit that on two occasions I drew a blank. One of these spots where I was certain I would find a mast is now being kept under observation by some of our helpers. I believe there is a strong possibility that eventually an aerial will appear on this location. One development, and one that we realized would come about, has been that the folk in charge of these aerials are aware of our activities, and probably knowing that we have the place under surveillance, they may be unwilling to construct a mast until it becomes imperative for the network as a whole to have one there. We have never been reluctant to let people know that we were up, or what we were up to in our searching and in our conclusions. As soon as new evidence had come along, we have passed it along the pipeline, which we believe is being tapped by, quote, them, end quote. There is nothing secret, classified, or underhand about our investigation. The New Zealand government has been kept up to date with my findings, both thorough correspondence and written reports direct to the Prime Minister. We have made a point of passing on each link in the chain of evidence to key personnel so that there can never be any suggestion made that our investigation is somehow or other, quote, subversive, end quote. Our whole aim was, or has been, to bring facts to light so that from sheer weight of the evidence, someone in authority somewhere sooner or later is going to have to admit to the public that not only do UFOs exist, but that the grid system on which they operate is also an established fact. And until this happens, our work shall continue. If it should happen that I am stopped, there are many others now with the knowledge that will be able to enable them to continue the investigation with or without official approval. The information we have patiently garnered over the course of several years has been spread out, and I have personally schooled others so that they can carry on if it becomes necessary. Several journalists, some of them correspondents for overseas organizations, are also kept informed of our progress, and it will now be impossible for the truth to be hidden for much longer. When the admission is finally made, when it is stated that marsh gas the rise and fall of Venus, and all other rubbish trotted out by the tame and not so tame scientists who seemingly have forgotten the first principles of science to explain UFO sightings are not the be-all and end-all of UFO phenomenon. Then our investigation will slow down. Our aims will have been achieved. Our search for aerials has continued throughout the months up until the present time, and still the odd mast is drawn to our attention. They can be seen throughout New Zealand, and we know they exist abroad as well, from reports from as far as Australia, France, and America. In this country, we have uncovered them from Invercargill to the north of Auckland. Most numerous are those shaped like boxes, but others have slight variations. One variety is an elongated type that looks something like the framework of a box kite, presumably for more efficient directional purposes. Some have highly polished metal sphere placed within the box shape. For some reason, these spheres, which are quite large, give off flashes of light observable from many miles away on a fine day. This type is easily seen from the air, from as far away as 15 miles. Whether the light is reflected from a prismatic surface or emitted from within the spheres themselves is something we do not know yet. We do not know what this sphere is or what it does. One possible explanation was offered by a director of a scientific equipment manufacturing company in the United States. Quote, "The needle-like protruding elements on the ball are unidirectional vertical probes. In the ball, a transducer or transistor preamp director directs any signal from above the main antenna down the main antenna, and this is then relayed from one antenna tower to the next to a main base of receiver operations. This then would prevent any accidental reception of the signal from a UFO, etc., from being picked up by just any radio that happened to be tuned to the right frequency. I prefer to think that the little ball on top of the receiver receives at a much higher wavelength or frequency than the ball's transistorized circuit, acting as a converter, reduces the received signal to a lower frequency, and it is then carried from one tower to the next until it reaches its home receiver station." End quote. Another hint of connection between the strange aerials and UFOs is the fact the grid aerial under the sea off the coast of South America, photographed in 1964 by the U.S. survey ship Eltanin, that's spelled Eltanin, has ball-shaped objects on the extremities of its antenna. Moreover, antennae protruding from UFOs have been observed also to have ball-shaped ends. The other main type of aerial which appears to be built into the grid consists of a similar lattice steel mast with heavy-looking aerial elements supported horizontally across the top. Some minor masts within the system are more like ordinary TV aerials. The pattern produced on a map by pinpointing the aerials is a complex one, especially when positioned on a map that also includes the UFO grid. After a close study of the network, it becomes obvious that the man-made aerials have been built into the UFO grid for a definite purpose, and apparently with a full awareness of the existence of the UFO grid. A number of areas in New Zealand where UFO activity has been pronounced are also areas in which the aerials occur. As our investigation went on, a mass of information was built up from the aerial network, and I have been able to check many of our own theories against it. The discovery that they had placed their equipment in specific geometric positions gave me clues which have led me on to new discoveries. They are now aware of this, and I imagine I am not too popular with them. First, for having stumbled on the aerial network, and then for not having the decency to keep quiet about it. The discovery of the aerials and our conclusions about their function, plus the new discoveries which we have derived from our understanding of their positioning, have given rise to a cat and mouse affair which has sometimes been anything but a game. The following chapters will enlarge upon these matters in detail. And that's the end of chapter 5. I think we could knock out one more. How about you guys? I think we can do it. And I'll check the chat in a moment here. 68. Yeah, we got 10 pages with a few grids to show afterward. Oh wow, I'm reading the chat here with Woo. So Elon's launching another rocket to go. You ever notice that? All these rockets just go in an arch. Alright, we're going to start chapter 6 here. Chapter 6 is Scientists and the UFOs. We're going to try to knock this out in a half hour. Alright. Scientists and the UFOs. The discovery of a network of man-made transmitting stations around our city, described in the preceding chapter, was the most startling tangible fact that we had encountered in our UFO research. We discovered that Auckland City and the surrounding areas were linked with the transmitters by numerous geometric alignments. Further investigation suggests very strongly that the pattern is still incomplete, and that other stations are yet to be added to the system. Months passed before we were able to determine the positions of all the stations plotted on the survey maps, and at that stage we considered that there were enough evidence to prove that the secret experiments were being carried out. We decided also that it was now necessary to bring to public attention all the facts so far established and to fill in further details of the aerial network patterns as each new additional aerial came to our notice. On the basis of the material in this chapter, some readers may wish to carry out investigations of their own into the aerial system, and I do encourage everyone to look further into this stuff. If so, we would certainly be interested in hearing about those details and results. As each aerial was discovered, its precise position was plotted on the same grid map of Auckland and its surrounding districts, which I had used when I established the positions of UFO activity published in my first book. The question was whether there was some correlation between the positions of known UFO activity and the location of the transmitting aerials. Remember, the UFO positions had been established several years before our investigations into the aerials. It was soon very clear indeed that there were connections between the UFO positions and the more recently found aerial locations. This next part's very important. Straight lines drawn through different combinations of aerial positions produced definite geometric patterns which were clearly linked to the UFO positions. When these patterns were further analyzed, it appeared that where the building of a man-made station was not possible for topographic reasons, a UFO may have been brought into place or blast an aerial or similar device into position. One of these positions was, we believe, in the middle of a factory in Rosebank Road in the Auckland suburb of Avondale. Another such position was, in our opinion, near the corner of Rutland Street in the central part of the city. If this hypothesis is correct, one is naturally led to the conclusion that scientists were well aware in advance that certain locations would be subjected to extensive damage as a result of the placement of aerial devices. We do not dispute that research of the kind being undertaken in secrecy involving both UFOs and aerials may be essential for the advancement of mankind, but it is the secrecy that we feel is wrong. Moreover, the dangers inherent where aerial locations fall upon crowded city areas must be obvious. If the rules of geometry and the concepts involved are those of geometrics, compel whoever is responsible to construct apparatus of a dangerous nature in densely populated areas, then surely the citizens of those areas have a right to be told, and to be warned of the possible consequences of the experiments to be carried out. If the investigators of the research happen also to be representatives of a foreign country, which we believe to be the case, this is all the more reason for the nature of the experimental work to be made public. One scientist had told me quite plainly that the aerial network is not under the control of the New Zealand government. I find the implications of that statement rather disquieting. Is it possible that New Zealand, one of the last peaceful sanctuaries on this planet, is being manipulated by a power group operating outside the normal confines of democratic control? I believe there is a distinct possibility that this is a situation and that no government, large or small, is able to control its activities. Yeah, they're talking about the secret government, right? The secret world government. The knowledge possessed already by the group may be so advanced that those who have the secrets may be in a position to dictate action on their own terms, particularly if political leverage is applied at the same time through normal governmental channels. It was suggested to me by my informant that this was indeed the case, and that New Zealand would be cut off from certain overseas aid if our government refused to follow the activities of foreign scientists to continue within our territory. We believe that this is too high a price. If our dealings with overseas interests are not openly and honestly carried out, then we would be much better off not to have this work going on in our midst. Who among us anywhere in the world has the right to decide who should and who should not have access to advanced technical knowledge, or to any knowledge for that matter? Technological superiority is dangerous only when held by a small group. History shows that groups of this very nature have, in times past, invariably used their superior knowledge for purposes other than for the good of all humanity, eventually destroying themselves and large numbers of their fellow men along with them. And I'm going to pause reading for right now because this loops back into something I mentioned on Thursday's show that I didn't mention here yet. But they could be talking about sound weapons. Giant sound weapons. And in effect, that would soften any type of rock or hard ground, making it almost like quicksand. And it would change the structure of the material itself using certain frequencies. And it could very well be what Ed used to cut out these pieces of what's now considered coral rock. And once he had them softened up, he cut them out. And then used more frequencies to make them weightless. And then moved them into position. That's what I think's going on here. So two different layers of frequencies. One to soften hardened material, and another to make it weightless. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, I'll talk about the rockets at the end of this show here, because it's all connected to this stuff here too. We're talking about the UFOs and the energy grid here, and ham radios and secret non-government projects. So we're tapping it all here today. Welcome to the deep dive. All right, let's continue on. The atomic bomb offers a prime example of the folly of secrecy in the field of advanced technology. I know for certain that my theories regarding the bomb have been proved correct. The bomb is, in short, a geometric device which can only be detonated in accordance with the unbreakable laws of geometry. The device is detonated by the manipulation of the relative motions of the atomic particles enclosed within its casing. And this can only be effected by placing the bomb on, under, or over a specific geometric point related to the Earth's surface at a specific time. The relative motions of the Earth and Sun at this instant of time cause the disruption of the unstable particles of uranium, plutonium, cobalt, or whatever unstable matter is used to trigger the explosion. Every test of nuclear devices since World War II has been designed to discover all the geometric combinations possible for the detonation of the atom. So are they saying they have to move these things over the certain parts of the energy grid so that the bomb would explode? That that's how it's detonated? Sure seems like that's what they're saying here. Because of the secrecy imposed on this advanced body of knowledge, every major power has been frantically carrying out experimental tests in an endeavor to keep up with or ahead of rival powers, in the fear that one or the other will eventually get the upper hand. The computers of each nation concerned are fed with this information so that calculations can be made ahead as to where and when a nuclear device might be triggered. So they're hot spots that they could trigger the atomic bombs at precise locations to have it detonate. At certain times of the seasons, they can also do that as well. In this way, the spiral of insecurity and distrust has increased its momentum until at this present time, the world has become a madhouse with ourselves, its inmates. Unless something is done, a system set up for the pooling of all knowledge, we shall end up, as have so many other civilizations, intent on annihilation of the race. And again, this was in 1990. And this version of the book was republished in 97. So, if every intelligent individual had free access to these secrets immediately after the war, the sheer weight of public opinion alone might have been enough to prevent the insane game now being played the world over in the name of national security. Certainly, at least, the brakes would have been applied to slow down our headlong rush to eternity. The geometric nature of the bomb makes a nuclear war completely illogical, and perhaps this explains the present concentration of research in the United States, England, Switzerland, and elsewhere into bacterial and chemical warfare techniques. You know, this makes a solid point here. They're saying that there's only certain times and places where atomic bombs can be detonated. Which, in turn, if you follow that line of thinking, you couldn't possibly have an all-out war like you would with, let's say, cannons and firearms. You would have to plan out where these things would be allowed to expand, and I never really thought about that before. This is new information to me. All right. Let's continue. And this is going to elaborate on that line of thought here. Why is a nuclear war illogical? Let's take, for example, if Russia, let us say, were to launch a missile in an attempt to demolish New York, the Americans would have known months in advance that such and such a time the city would have been a potential nuclear target. Their computers would have told them so. Naturally, all defenses would have been alerted for that one target point until the danger period had passed. If a missile managed to get through the defense system and New York was incinerated, America would want immediate retaliation. But again, because of the solar geometrics involved, this would not be possible at any unspecified time for any specific Soviet target. It could take hours, days, or weeks for a major target in Russia to match the harmonic geometrics of the sun position in order for a missile to be successfully launched towards that point with any certainty of its detonation. And so it would drag on month after month. For this very reason, it became necessary to arm submarines with nuclear weapons and launching devices so that they could roam the oceans in secrecy and be able to position themselves in such a way that they could launch nuclear missiles at enemy targets as the right times came up. So everything has to be aligned energetically in order for these things to even go off. Meanwhile, at the top, those who had started this insane war and those in control on both sides would know clearly and well in advance where the danger spots were going to be. They would make sure that they themselves were many hundreds of miles away until the danger periods had passed. The general populace, you can be sure, would be blissfully unaware of impending explosions. An even more dangerous and complex game has now been initiated by the same group. Knowledge obtained from the bomb has opened a door to secrets of anti-gravity. If one group or another obtains supremacy in this field, they could, if they desired, rule the world. For UFOs are real. They are anti-gravity machines. Someone has advanced knowledge about them. Now we would like to have access to the truth, all of it, and a democratic voice in the control of our own destiny. My informant declared that this group was not concerned with moral issues. Its representatives are here to carry out certain work, and it is only this task that interests them. It is neither right nor good, he declared, for the public to have knowledge such as this. My answer was that I was part of the public, a free man in what I believed to be a free country, and that, relying on my own resources, I had been able to discover a considerable amount of information concerning the activities of the people in question. I often wonder how much worry, how many years of hard work I could have saved myself if only it could have been possible for me to study all the relevant data in freely available technical publications. Isn't it the right of all free citizens to have access to the technology of the future? I firmly believe that we do all have that right. The alternative is to end up like Pavlov's dogs, when we may all be forced to perform at the will of a new kind of master. Time and again, I have asked to be given just one good moral reason why the data known to the UFOs should not be published. So far, no reason has been forthcoming, and I believe that none exists. Investigations of a private nature, such as I have undertaken, will be carried on. I believe firmly that others with more intelligence and greater technical ability than I have will continue this work. To look more closely at the aerial network in and around the city of Auckland, the picture is a complicated one, but a prolonged study of the system reveals many connections with the geometric harmonics associated with anti-gravity and UFO phenomena. It shows without a doubt that some technicians at least have direct communication with UFOs that have been active on the positions indicated on the Auckland section of the UFO grid. Who is actually in control of the UFOs? This we cannot yet determine. But there are several possible answers, including the following. Number 1. The UFOs are controlled by extraterrestrials who are greatly advanced in science. These aliens are instructing our scientists in new technological fields. Number 2. Earth scientists have uncovered the secrets of anti-gravity and have managed to construct a small number of UFO-type vehicles. These anti-gravity machines are now being used to further research and to improve their scientific techniques. Number 3. The UFOs are under the control of extraterrestrials, and their activity is aimed at hindering Earth scientists in their research. Number 4. An alien group of people from space have lived among us secretly throughout history and now control the world. They are in charge of all advanced scientific experimentation. And it says in parentheses here, this we feel is the least likely answer. Number 5. Other possibilities which we are as yet unaware of. We do not know any more than you do which answer is the true one, but it may not be too long before we find out. I was told by a foreigner holding a high position with one of the government ministries that I would be stopped from publishing this book by those in charge of, quote, the experiment, end quote. The group, I was told, quote, is all powerful and you can't possibly beat them, end quote. My answer was that I was fully aware of the power wielded by the group, as well as of my own relative insignificance. History shows that in other ages, insignificant men have succeeded in upsetting the plans of power groups. And with perseverance and luck, I may be able to do the same. Because I am convinced that the group closely guarding secrets that should be freely available to all is morally evil. A study of the Auckland map will show that it is an exact reproduction of the grid map published in my previous book. The grid lattice covers areas of 1 minute of arc square. Positions 1 through 6 are those of UFO activity previously plotted. These are in more detail. Number 1, Rosebank Road factory demolished by an unexplained explosion. A UFO was reported over the scene before the explosion occurred. Number 2, unexplained explosion at the corner of Rutland Street, Auckland City. Number 3, UFO observed hovering near the museum in Auckland Domain. Number 4, UFO observed hovering behind a house in Inverary Road, Epsom, in suburban Auckland. Number 5, Lake Pupuki, North Shore, over which point a UFO has been observed. Number 6, object was seen entering the water from the air at this point. Number 7, I was informed by the head of a government department in Auckland that a UFO had been seen hovering over this point. Number 8, this is the position of a base staffed by personnel from one of the most powerful nations on Earth. This fact was first drawn to my attention during a visit to Victoria University, Wellington, in 1969. I had presented a lecture to students. After the lecture, which covered aspects of the UFO grid system, I was showing a copy of the Auckland grid map to the American air attaché, who had asked to be present incognito. and the editor of Salient, the university student newspaper. So I'm just going to show this grid right now. I think it's big enough to show here. It's almost forming a triangle too, huh? Is it the New Zealand triangle? I got another show to do now. No, all joking aside though, this is very heavily researched and these maps were put together by very intelligent people. So to laugh this off would be foolish of anyone, really. Alright, to continue on, the student asked me what point I knew about the American base on the North Shore at Carey Point. Surprised, I asked, "What base?" He replied, "You must know what base I mean. You have plotted it on your map." Talking about this one right here. I told him quite truthfully that I had no knowledge of any such base. The point on the grid map to which he was referring to was where I had plotted coordinates crossing the Quarry Point. He insisted that I must have known about the base in order to have plotted it so accurately. I explained that I was completely unaware of the significance of the position and had only been aware that certain lines connecting other stations crossed at this point. I had left it to a future time to study the position further. Reflecting on this conversation some days later, it occurred to me that I had probably been set up for in some way by the invitation to lecture at Victoria University. However, this conclusion may have been unkind to the students who were involved. In any case, the visit was well worth the time and effort, since at least I had gained a hint about a base established on Auckland's North Shore. Since then, I had found that the base does indeed exist, and that very few people in this city of more than 500,000 are aware of it. A New Zealand electronics technician contacted me, for example, and he turned out to be one person who had access to the base. He was very interested in what I was doing and what I knew. Quote, "Don't you know what happens to people who know too much?" End quote, he warned me. Somewhat taken aback, I went to some pains to explain to him that in the event of anything untoward happening to me, I had taken the precaution of making and putting into safekeeping several copies of a long list of names of people involved with the experiment, and that they might be embarrassed at the inevitable questions that would follow a mishap to me. His question gave me some anxiety, but I felt fairly certain that the group would realize that putting me out of action would only draw attention to themselves. I put a circle around the position of the Quarry Point based on the map, and later, out of curiosity, measured the distance in minutes of arc, or nautical miles, to another mysterious establishment staffed by Americans at Woodburn RNZAF base near Blenheim in the South Island. The plotted distance was just on 288 minutes of arc relative to the accuracy of the map I had access to at the time. It appeared that the two bases were positioned in this way for the purposes of setting up a harmonic geometric relating to twice the speed of light. My interest was immediately focused, and I have believed from that time that there is a definite geometric connection between the two stations which allows electronic experimentation. Recently, I carried out a more accurate series of calculations by computer in relation to these 2 points and found much more persuasive evidence regarding a geometric connection. I had more mathematical data to work with, collected over many years, and had discovered that the seemingly obvious did not always turn out to be the right answer. One of the interesting facts that I had discovered was that I could shift the harmonic values up or down the scale by multiplying or dividing by 6 or 60. We normally use degrees, minutes, or seconds in arc measure relative to the Earth's surface, but equivalent geometric wavelengths can be increased or decreased below or above these normal values. In fact, the ones above can be decreased in length an infinite number of times for the creation of very high frequency transmissions. I applied this exercise to the computed distance between the two stations as follows. Distance between stations, distance 284.9006 minutes of arc, nautical miles, multiplied by 6, 9 times, is 2.87114 to the 9th power. The square root of the 287.1140 harmonic is equal to 169.4444 harmonic. The latitudinal displacement between the two stations was computed to be 4.706666 degrees, which equals 16944 seconds of arc harmonic. The longitude of Cathie Point is equal to 174 degrees and 42 feet. If we subtract 90 degrees from this valley to ascertain the position of Cathie Point within the appropriate 90 degree sector, we have 84 degrees and 42 feet, which equals 84.7 degrees, which is a half harmonic of 169.4 harmonic. I am not sure how accurate this value has to be for practical application, but it has been found that this particular harmonic, 169.444, has a direct connection with communication, particularly space communication. Hi Jay, I see you there. Nice to have you here. This says, see the last chapter, Wake Up Earth. This is a revised book, so. We did go over a lot of mathematicals a few weeks ago. Okay. Continuing on. The circumference of the latitude which passes through the Woodburn position of 269.53 degrees relative to the equator, which could be associated with the harmonic values derived from the unified equations. All the evidence suggests a use of very accurately computed geometric positions for the purpose of extremely advanced scientific experimentation. If so, New Zealand is very strategically placed on the Earth's surface. A further interesting factor was that the geometric coordinate connecting the Cathie Point station to the points at which massive explosions had occurred, Rosebank Road and Rutland Street, 1 and 2 respectively on the map, were equal. A line between two explosion points, in other words, was the baseline of an isosceles triangle the apex of which was the Kari point position. I checked the length of the baseline and found that the distance between the two explosions was 288 seconds of arc, or twice the speed of light harmonic, subject to the accuracy of the plot. Further, if the isosceles triangle so formed were to be bisected, which is shown by line 8 through 32 on the map, then the coordinate 8 to 32 was equal to coordinate 32 to 4. Position 4 is that of a UFO sighted hovering behind a house in Inverary Road, Epsom, a verified sighting. Could this be yet another coincidence? I could hardly believe so. The angle formed by 1 through 8 and 2 is equal to 288,000 seconds of arc, subject to the accuracy of the plot, which is also a harmonic of twice the speed of light. I have recently studied this pattern again at some length, and again subject to the accuracy of the plot. I believe the following geometric coordinates are built into the system. A radius with the center at position 8 and passing through positions 1 and 2 would have a length of 231.48147 seconds of arc. If we multiply this value by 6 to shift the harmonic up the scale, then we produce the harmonic 13888.888. This is twice the harmonic of 6944.444, which is the reciprocal of the speed of light. The circumference of a circle formed by this radius would be 1454.441 seconds of arc relative. If we multiply this value by 6 times 6 times 6, then we produce the value 314159.27, which is the direct harmonic of pi, or 3.141597. Quite remarkable, this says. Number 9. This is where we discovered that the first aerial of the network, as described in Chapter 3. It was from this point that the whole aerial investigation started. The first geometric lineup we found was 924, 2 and 4 being 2 UFO positions previously plotted. Other coordinates from 9 are 9 to 30 to 11, 9 to 8 to 16 to 17, and 9 to 6 to 28. It would appear that these lineups then are not just accidental. Positions 10 and from 13 through 29 are all man-made transmitter stations which have sophisticated aerial systems attached to them. Photographs have been taken of each, and copies are filed away in a variety of safe places. The geometric patterns produced by connecting all the stations show definite evidence of linkage. The harmonics involved are complex, and I shall leave their solution for mathematically inclined readers. The various angles formed by intersecting lines also have harmonic association. Positions 11 and 12 appear to be 2 major stations. They fall within the area of the Waitakere Mountains to the west of Auckland, and the aerial masts can be seen from miles distant. It may be argued that this is purely coincidental, that stations are in geometric alignment with others on the map, but if coincidence is the answer, I dare say no one will have any objection to my having free access to the buildings in order to photograph and study the electronic equipment installed within. One of the buildings, by the way, is constructed like a fortress. Finally, on the map I have plotted positions 30 and 31, which I believe to be sites where some type of transmitting equipment will be set up in the future. The distance between these points is equivalent to 8 times the speed of light harmonic of 1439, or 8c. The square root of this value is 3.3927. The harmonic of 3927 is incorporated in this group of figures. I had earlier found that a harmonic of 3393 was one of many used in the detonation of an atomic bomb. Activity of an odd variety has already been observed around these two positions, and a close watch will be kept to see what eventuates. Aerials are still appearing, but we shall not complicate the map any further. We and the many people who have aided us in our investigations believe that there's more than sufficient evidence here already to support our demand for a full and open investigation into the whole system, which of course is not confined to Auckland, but is spread throughout New Zealand. Who is in charge of the experiment? Where do the necessary funds come from? What is the intention of those in control of the system when the work is complete and all of the answers are in? Will they then tell us the full story about the UFOs? Frankly, I doubt it. And that is the end of chapter 6. We have one more grid here to show. It says this shows refined section of grid A over the city of Auckland, New Zealand. Circles show positions of UFO activity. See grid map showing positions of man-made transmitting stations. Original map published in Harmonic 33. I mean, it's going to be a little difficult to compare side by side here, but give me a second. All right. So this is New Zealand, and we have all of these sightings coordinated on the grid here. You see A and B are on a direct line. B and C are on a direct line. C and D are almost on a 90-degree angle from each other. I believe that is E up there. E and F are on the same line. And then G is over by itself. And compare that to this, which are the man-made. I mean, we have the grid here. Man-made transition stations are one circle. American scientific ones are triple circle. UFO activity and Harmonic 33 is double circle. And then there's also stations yet to be established. So I'll zoom in here. Look at that central point there for B. Or no, it's number 8, my bad. We got through 2 chapters today. But Bruce Cathie is talking about double the speed of light, and I think he even said quadruple the speed of light today. And that's the type of frequencies they're working with here. All harmonics, all sound. man-made radio towers lined up along the similar grid where UFO sightings have occurred. What do y'all think of this so far? We'll talk a little bit about Ed's place here before we get going, and also the rockets too, since I was brought up in the chat. The story of Ed Leedskalnin just lifting these things on his own with a pulley, it doesn't add up. He knew what he was doing with getting this to be sort of a tourist attraction. He picked certain places, one in Florida City, and then what we're seeing here, which is Homestead, Florida. And this is right next to the Everglades. And then the Florida Keys are actually not that far away from them either. And then also the Bermuda Triangle. So you have to wonder if Ed was reading about these different grid systems, or he just figured it out on his own, because he was using what I think it was like witching rods to find locations where he could possibly end up building this castle. And it just doesn't seem like something he or any normal person could be able to pull off on their own unless they had significant superior knowledge. I mean, look at the marks on the side of this thing. That tells me that it was softened at one point. Those are supposed to be from wooden wedges. Look at that. I don't think that's from wooden wedges, unless he softened the rock with harmonics. Just doesn't make too much sense to me in regards to the explanation that's given to the general public and then what we're discovering here. This book was referenced as a reference guide to the Coral Castle book that we started this whole deep dive series off with. So this is in direct correlation to all of this stuff that we're viewing on screen here too. That's the pit that he got all of the rock wall out of. I want to say he cut it like a cake, like a soft cake. And that he had a radio device too. We read in the book that he was communicating on the radio and also receiving radio signals from other people. Whether they were in the area or not, that was undetermined. There's just not enough information left about that in regards to Ed. I'm going to take a break from speaking for a moment here. Okay. So about the Elon Musk rockets. Really want to look at that stuff? He has a base on NASA grounds. And so does Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon. I was going to save this for another time, another video series, but I will show you something here today. Oh, maybe I don't have it here. But I have pictures from the NASA grounds. So like they turned it into an amusement park of sorts. At least that's what I look at it as. Yeah, I don't think I have it. So I'll have to show it next time. Or at a future time. I can't find it right now. But really, I visited NASA around the same time I visited Coral Castle. It was on the same trip. And NASA, really, it felt like a Six Flags amusement park or Disney World, whatever you want to call it. They had a lot of things on display like a museum, but they also had gift shops, they had rides. They had a little globe of NASA outside the front of the place. It was interesting, I'll say that much. But as far as the rockets go, we were talking a little earlier about how they never go straight up. And that you could say, oh, it's the curvature. But we're not talking about curvature here. Even though, like, we have these grids that are in this book that we just read from today. All the grids are dealing with straight lines. It's almost an oxymoron to have a grid on this front cover with a globe. When you're plotting thousands of miles of plot points with straight lines. Explain that. If anyone thinks they have a better explanation, tell me. Why put it on a straight lined grid like this? I'd just like to know that. If this is supposedly where we're at, we shouldn't be having the straight line grid on this at all. But the rockets do tend to do an arc. You never see it. Well, even with the Elon Musk stuff, we never have seen them successfully go up anywhere. They've all been exploding. There's been malfunctions with the rockets on it themselves. Fuel issues. Minor details that like cause the whole thing to blow up. We've had them come back down. But like from where? The inner atmosphere? Because we have the Van Allen radiation belt. We're not going to get this thing out to the moon. The Van Allen radiation belt, the radiation apparently is very heavy up there. But I think it also is connected to something with the forces that are above our head. It's just too heavy. In a sense. Too dense. I've seen amateur videos from about 10 years ago where somebody sent up a video camera with a rocket. Or with a weather balloon, I think it was. And it was going up and up and up and up. And then it made this noise like... And it stopped. And it almost was like it was floating. And it could sound like the microphone on the video camera sounded like if you were to throw a GoPro into a swimming pool. And then the balloon bursted and then the whole thing came crashing down. But I think they retrieved that video footage either from GPS or they had it digitally transmitted. But either way, it just opens up more questions than answers. Just like in the film series of Star Wars by George Lucas, that has inaccuracies in it of lasers being heard in space. If it's supposed to be a vacuum, there shouldn't be any sound effects. But the whole concept of science fiction space, I think, is to remain in science fiction. Because right now we are reading science fact. And for the most part, they're not saying that these UFOs are coming from other planets. But they, in fact, are probably coming from other dimensions or planes. There was a really good Art Bell episode on Coast to Coast quite a while back now. where a caller called in saying they were flying into the Area 51. And they go on to say about how the aliens are interdimensional beings. Not interspace, but interdimensional. And whether that has credibility or not, you know, it's up to your discernment. But Art Bell had a lot of interesting guests on during his time. And for those of you in the know, John B. Wells took over the Coast to Coast AM radio show after Art Bell. And then George Norrie took over after John B. Wells left. And Art Bell and John B. Wells both continued with their own radio shows after Coast to Coast. And there's a great archive of all of their stuff if you want to check up into that. I was researching all of that stuff a good 10 years ago now. 10 years plus. And like I said before, it's just creating more questions than answers. But it's keeping things interesting, and I continue to do research on this. But I think we're getting close to a better understanding of what Ed Leedskalnin was using in terms of knowledge of the world grid system and how matter can be manipulated. So that's going to be it for today, guys. I went a little over half hour what I wanted to, but we got 2 chapters covered. I guess for a preview of next week, we're going to be talking more math, more numbers. Sorry if it's boring, but we have to learn how to apply this information to what we are investigating here. Chapter 7, the mathematical values of interest, will be where we pick up next week. Yeah, this is going to get very information heavy. If we can pull it off for next week too, we'll go into chapter 8 as well. The Earth's magnetic field. I'm just checking how many pages. Oh, that's really fast. It's only 4 pages. So chapter 7, 8, 9 is even short. But this all is with mathematical equations. Alright, I'll say between chapter 7 and 9 we'll try to get done for next week. And then the week after that, 2 weeks from now, we'll be looking at the maps of the ancients. And I think that's going to throw all of this for a little loop. Here's just a sneak preview. World grid system discovered by the Russians. And look at right there where Ed is. Right off the coast. He's literally like right up against that line. Like right above the line. And then the Bermuda Triangle's in that circle there. I kid you not. Like that's where all that activity happens. And then you have this ley line over here, which goes through the Rockies, it looks like. But that's just one instance. And we'll also be covering Tesla in this book as well. So that'll do it. I won't spoil too much more of this read through. But I thank all of you for being here. I really appreciate it. And try to check us out tomorrow. Same time, 6 p.m. I will be doing another live interview with a new guest. And I'm going to keep it a surprise for right now. You'll be able to see the thumbnail once I get the preview of the live show posted. But just keep a lookout for that. I'll be live again tomorrow. And then Thursday we'll pick up again with the Bermuda Triangle series. But I really appreciate you all being here. And that's going to do it for today. So, until the next one. Class dismissed.